that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tents, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to
Just
work.
want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The economy takes centre stage as the Conservative Party focuses on its pension plan and Labour refuses to rule out tax rises. Diane Abbott has the Labour whip restored after being suspended and investigated over comments about Jewish people. Also tonight, Israeli tanks reach central Rafah, but Israel denies carrying out new strikes in a humanitarian zone. We'll get the response from the US. A 20-year-old man has been arrested tonight on suspicion of the murder of 34-year-old Amy Gray, who died after being stabbed on a beach in Bournemouth. Hollywood star Robert De Niro in clashes outside court as the jury in Donald Trump's hush money trial is about to begin deliberating on whether to convict the former president of criminal charges.
What's your view of Donald Trump?
You know my view of Donald Trump. He's a monster. He should not be allowed. Listen.
Back up, people. Give him a little room. Little breathing room. Give him a little room.
He cannot be president of the United States again. Never, ever.
And an apology from the Vatican over the Pope's use of homophobic language. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. Labour has laid out its plans to be the party of business today. But the woman hoping to be the next Chancellor of the Exchequer has refused to rule out further tax rises. Rachel Reeves said all of her plans would be fully costed, but they're being accused of not delivering any detail on what policies they would deliver. The Conservatives, meanwhile, promised to raise the tax-free pension allowance if they win the next election. We'll test what that means for you in a moment. But tonight, updates on Diane Abbott, who has had the whip returned, and on the Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner's living arrangements. Sky's Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, reports.
Firing up the engines of growth. Labour says that's its biggest mission. And she's here to persuade you that she has the right answers.
Today, I want to put forward a simple proposition, that this changed Labour Party is today the natural party of British business.
Labour wants to sell itself as the risk-free option for businesses and voters alike.
Our plans for growth are built on partnership with business. The government that will build all its plans for the future on the bedrock of economic stability.
That caution means no rushed decisions. A summer budget is off the cards if Labour wins, so they can properly crunch the numbers. The party is proudly waving a letter showing 120 businesses back them, but big names conspicuously absent.
Shadow Chancellor, you're brandishing today the letter from 120 business figures. Several of those are no longer in top jobs. There isn't anyone from the FTSE 100 on it. Why do you think that is?
I'm really proud of the backing in that letter from 120 business leaders today, from businesses big, medium and small, across a whole range of British industries.
Sky News revealed some signatories are listed as working for companies which are currently dormant. Businesses, like voters, want to know what would happen to taxes in a Labour government. The answer not as clear as they might like.
Everybody's expecting you to get into power if you win the election, declare that there's a much bigger black hole than you're expected because of the Tory mess. Can you rule out anything around VAT? Are there other tax rises that you think might have to run? Your plans might change.
There are no further increases in tax that we are planning or that we need to fill any black holes.
So are you ruling that out for the whole Parliament?
Well, we've already ruled out increases in income tax, national insurance and corporation tax.
So there could be raises in other taxes other than those three?
I'm not going to write a budget here.
No tax rises planned, but the Shadow Chancellor giving herself wiggle room if the sums don't add up. Relief for another figurehead of Labour's campaign today. Angela Rayner cleared of any criminal wrongdoing over claims she avoided tax over the sale of her home. The issue had dogged the deputy leader for months. She said she would resign if found guilty. Today, she welcomed the decision and called the Tory complaint to police desperate. This man needs to knock his opponent off course. The Prime Minister precision targeting his party's traditional voters. Labour have claimed he's putting pensions at risk with unfunded promises. Now, a Tory tax break for pensioners, a £2.4 billion appeal to the voters his party relies on most.
Today's announcement of the new Triple Lock Plus, an increase in the personal allowance for pensioners, millions of pensioners getting a tax cut as well. That shows that our plan is working, and if we stick with that plan, the bold action that I'm prepared to take, like today's announcement for pensioners, that shows that we can deliver a secure future for everyone across our country.
Labour is taking a safety-first approach to the economy and this campaign. But their opponents are splashing the cash and voters want clear answers. Is stability enough? Sam Coates, Sky News, Derby.
Well, all the way through this election campaign, we will be checking some of the promises made by the parties and testing them out. As we've heard there, the Conservatives announced the Triple Lock Plus, meaning the personal allowance for pensioners will increase, and the claim is that 8 million pensioners would be better off. Sky's Tom Clark has been examining the numbers to see what it means for people.
The Conservatives' campaign pledge is, in the words of Pensions Minister Laura Trott, to make sure the state pension never crosses the income tax threshold. Will this policy do that? Well, in short, yes. These dotted lines here show the current income tax threshold and how it's changed over time. The one in black's the current one. You start paying tax on income over £12,500. And with the newer state pension on track to rise beyond that by 2027, the proposed new threshold will ensure you don't pay income tax on your state pension. However, it's important to point out this situation is a result of Conservative policies, and this pledge just reverses a change brought in by the Tories. The higher tax threshold for pensioners in place under the Labour government was scrapped by George Osborne in 2016. Now, according to the Treasury Secretary, again, by next year, this is a tax cut of around £100 for 8 million pensioners. Well, let's take a look at that. There's over 3 million people receiving the new state pension here in orange, and in blue, around 9 million people on the older state pension who receive considerably less. As you can see, no one living on the old state pension alone will have got anywhere near close to paying tax on it next year. The immediate tax benefit only really applies to younger pensioners with additional income on top of their state pension. While poorer pensioners don't lose out under this proposal, it looks likely they'll see little, if any, financial benefit. The Conservatives say the pledge will cost £2.4 billion by the end of the next Parliament, funded by a clampdown on tax avoidance. Now, there are some question marks about the feasibility of that, but worth pointing out, Labour are claiming they'll also raise similar amounts from targeting tax dodgers. Laura Trott goes on to tell pensioners, choose the Conservatives with a clear plan, taking bold action to secure your future. Now, you could argue £100 a year rising to £275 by the end of the next Parliament isn't exactly life-changing amounts of money, but every little helps. What this statement ignores is the colossal pensions challenge facing whoever's in government next. Pension spending exceeds the budgets for education, Home Office and defence combined. And it's only going to get more expensive, unaffordably so, in the coming years as the working age population shrinks and retirees continue to live longer. No solution is pleasant, increasing the pension age well beyond the current proposal of 67, increasing taxation for all of us, or reducing the amount of money pensioners receive. So while we may hear some more short-term tweaks to pension policies on the campaign trail, the long-term fixes are probably far too politically toxic to get a mention in the run-up to an election.
And coming up later in the programme, we'll bring you what is happening here with the Lib Dem leader, Sir Ed Davey, and our correspondent Matthew Thompson in Lake Windermere. But first, let's go to Sam Coates, our deputy political editor, who joins us from Westminster tonight. Sam, obviously, a lot of focus today on the economy from both the Conservatives and the Labour, but also some news about Diane Abbott, who's been a key figure within the Labour Party for decades.
That's right. Look, today is the first day that I feel like Labour has been in the spotlight properly, much more than the Conservatives. And as you saw in my film, it looks as if Labour really do want to run a safety-first campaign throughout this election. But leadership involves binary choices that upset people, and that's what Keir Starmer really is finding out today with the case of Diane Abbott. Now, it seems increasingly clear that Britain's first black female MP, was first elected to Parliament in 1987, will not stand and will not be allowed to stand at this election to be re-elected as an MP. And this has upset plenty of members of the Labour Party who think that she should be given a send-off befitting her status. But Keir Starmer appears to be choosing that blocking her from standing will be worth it politically because it shows Labour has changed. So a big decision from him there. Then there's the question of tax. You heard my interview with Rachel Reeves. Clearly, Labour wants to stick to its pre-prepared lines, but when you push them, it's quite clear that they're leaving themselves all this wiggle room in case the inheritance from Labour, from the Tories, is worse. Governing and leadership requires difficult decisions, and while Keir Starmer might want to stick to a script for this campaign, voters need the information, which is why we're pushing. The kind of stuff comes out on the campaign trail that you don't get at other times.
Our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, with the latest there from Westminster. Sam, thank you. The White House has said a ground offensive in Rafah in southern Gaza is not warranted, but commenting on 2 deadly attacks in 2 days there, said Israel had not crossed the red line. Today, tanks have arrived in central Rafah for the first time since the start of this war. Palestinian authorities say that at least 37 people were killed by an IDF attack on a refugee camp in Al-Mawasi, which is west of Rafah today. The strike was outside the designated safe zone. It's just a day after 45 people were killed in a fire following Israeli airstrikes in a tent camp in Rafah on Sunday. Israel's prime minister has said the deaths were a technical failure. The IDF today said the airstrikes hit 180 meters away from UN refugee shelters. That's been corroborated by Sky's forensics unit. They say they used 2 small munitions in the strike outside the designated safe zone. But the IDF's map does not mark the smaller structures marked in red here on this satellite picture from the 24th of May, which shows newer settlements of displaced Gazans. The Kuwaiti peace camp, one site of the fire, is among those structures. The IDF say the fire could have been caused by a Hamas weapons dump being hit in the airstrike. And today, Israeli tanks reached the center of Rafah. We geolocated these tank trails to the point in the center of the city. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Banco sent us this report and a warning. It contains images of dead bodies and body bags from the start.
It's happened again. Another Israeli strike. This time in Al-Mawasi, just west of Rafah. In this video, I counted 6 bodies, lying contorted and burnt between the tents that provided little shelter and no protection. An aid worker carries a dead child and lays him down gently on a plank of wood. He can't have been more than 8 or 9 years old.
The strike happened there and we ran towards it to see what happened, and the second strike happened here next to us. We came and found about 6 to 7 of these people, my 4 cousins, some of their husbands and children.
2 days ago, this IDF strike near Rafah killed 45 people, mainly civilians. On Monday, the IDF said that it was a tragic mistake. They now appear to be blaming Hamas.
Our ammunition alone could not have ignited a fire of this size. Our investigation seeks to determine what may have caused such a large fire to ignite. We are looking into all possibilities, including the option that weapons stored in a compound next to our target, which we did not know of, may have ignited as a result of the strike.
The international outrage following the strike has not deterred Israel. These are the caterpillar treads left by Israeli tanks in the center of Rafah for the first time. Israel has ignored its allies because it believes that defeating Hamas is worth the diplomatic price they might have to pay.
We still don't believe that a major ground operation in Rafah is warranted. We still don't want to see the Israelis, as we say, smash into Rafah with large units over large pieces of territory. We still believe that, and we haven't seen that at this point. But we're going to be watching this, of course, very, very closely.
The US president had warned Israel that a major operation inside Rafah would be a red line. If that line hasn't now been crossed, then Israel surely is walking very close to it. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News in Jerusalem.
And let's bring in our U.S. correspondent Mark Stone from Washington. Mark, at the end of that report, we saw John Kirby, who's a spokesperson for the Biden administration, effectively saying that this attack had not crossed a red line in Rafah. Tell us more about the U.S. reaction to what's going on right now in Rafah.
Yeah, well, not just a red line, but the red line, the only red line that President Biden has set, and a massively thick one it was when he said 2 weeks ago, just over 2 weeks ago, that if Israel does in Rafah what it has already done in Khan Yunis, in Gaza City, then that would be the red line, and that after that, America would stop supplying offensive weapons to Israel. It is the case now, and it's taken some time for the White House to actually come to the podium in the form of John Kirby, not the president, to explain that they believe that this does not constitute a crossing of this red line. The reason, they say, is because, and I have to say, they do appear to be conducting some pretty spectacular verbal acrobatics in saying that they believe that this doesn't constitute a major ground offensive. Maybe not, but it is a major military offensive of a type, certainly, and they have used that phrase before. President Biden himself has talked about not wanting to see a major military offensive taking place in Rafah. Well, bit by bit, that red line is being pushed. It looks like it is a very elastic red line. I was struck, too, that John Kirby was asked specifically about those tanks in central Rafah. He said that it was his view they weren't in central Rafah. They were in what's known as the Philadelphia Corridor, a humanitarian corridor to the west of Rafah. Not so. Our own teams have verified where those tanks were. They are indeed in the centre of Rafah. The other point that I thought was very interesting is that he was asked, John Kirby was asked, whether President Biden has seen the images that we just played there, the images that we have been playing over the past few days and that all major networks have been playing as well. And his answer was interesting. He said, I don't know whether the president has seen those images. I find it quite extraordinary that the President of the United States, who is such who has such a central role in the way Israel is prosecuting this war, that his spokesman does not know whether the president has seen these images or not.
Our U.S. correspondent Mark Stone reporting there from Washington. Mark, thank you. A 20-year-old man from London has been arrested on suspicion of murder following the death of a woman on a beach in Bournemouth. 34-year-old Amy Gray died on Friday night. Our correspondent Saba Chowdhury is in Bournemouth for us tonight. Saba, what else do we know?
Good evening. Well, tonight, Dorset Police, working with the Metropolitan Police, have arrested a 20-year-old man from Croydon in South London. He's been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. This, of course, follows the fatal stabbing of a 34-year-old woman named locally here as Amy Gray. Police say that Amy tragically died at the scene on Friday, and another woman, a 38-year-old, is currently in hospital receiving treatment for serious injuries. Now, this news may provide some relief, some degree of relief to locals and to tourists, given that very little information had been shared by police the past 4 days. But it's also important to note that the local police here had another young man, a 17-year-old boy, in police custody, who was also arrested on suspicion of murder, who yesterday was released from prison without charge. Now, in the meantime, the local authorities here are calling on members of the public that have any information to come forwards, as it may help their investigation.
Saba Chowdhury with the latest there in Bournemouth. Saba, thank you. A former president, a porn star, and now film stars. The trial of Donald Trump is akin to a Hollywood movie. Today, the defense and prosecution have delivered their closing arguments, and the jury will now go out to begin deliberating on whether Mr. Trump, the presidential candidate, should be convicted in a criminal court. Sky's U.S. correspondent James Matthews reports from New York.
In New York, they were queuing through the night for the hottest ticket in town. Outside a court building, some distance off Broadway, some lined up for a seat to the Trump show, others for a seat to sell. In our audience sample, it was one for the money.
I've been here since Thursday.
What's the going rate for 4 days in a queue?
It's $50 an hour.
And two for the show.
To see him walking by me with no expression in his eyes, plodding from foot to foot, you'd almost feel sorry for him if you didn't know the horrible things he's done.
I don't want him to be president, and I want to be part of this historic trial.
He and we could see a verdict this week. Tuesday saw closing arguments from defence and prosecution, not before the protagonist had his say.
This is all election hunting, election interfering. It's going after Joe Biden's political opponent because he can't do it himself.
You are gangsters! On the day, Donald Trump wasn't the only headline act. Hollywood star Robert De Niro, a longtime critic, turned up to rail against the former president and ran up against his supporters. What's your view of Donald Trump?
You know my view of Donald Trump. He's a monster. He should not be allowed. Listen.
Let's back up, people. Give him a little room. Little breathing room. Let's give him a little room.
He cannot be president of the United States again. Never, ever.
The story told inside the court building in this corner of Manhattan was of a former president at the heart of a hush money scheme, who had directed payments to porn star Stormy Daniels to cover up a one-night stand before the 2016 election and so commit election fraud. Not so, said his defense team in closing arguments. Trump's lawyer Todd Blanche told the jury there was absolutely no intent to defraud, and beyond that, there was no conspiracy. President Trump is innocent. He did not commit any crimes, and the district attorney has not met their burden of proof, period. He told the jury they couldn't convict Donald Trump on the word of his former fixer Michael Cohen, the middleman in the hush money scheme who put Donald Trump at the heart of the conspiracy. The defense lawyer claimed he'd told lies, pure and simple. For their part, the prosecution countered that it's difficult to conceive of a case with more corroboration. On Michael Cohen and the conspiracy he testified to, prosecutor Josh Steinglass said, the truth is, he was in the best position to know. He was in the best position to know because he was the defendant's right hand. The closing thoughts of the prosecution and defence come after 5 weeks of evidence from 22 witnesses. Soon the 12 members of the jury will be sent out to consider their verdict. What comes next for Donald Trump comes down to them. The day wasn't done without a further round of presser wars. The press conference this time from the family of the accused.
I watch a man, he's the toughest man I've ever seen, and he endures this nonsense every single day.
This trial isn't typical of the traffic through the US court system, given the personnel and the implications. Of all the cases in all its courtrooms, there are none bigger. James Matthews, Sky News, in New York.
The Vatican has apologized today after Pope Francis used a homophobic slur during a private meeting. A statement released on behalf of the Pope said the church is a place for everyone, but he has been criticized by people within the LGBT community. A warning: this report from Adam Parsons does contain the offensive word used by the Pope.
Pope Francis this week meeting his public. He is the focal point of global Christianity, a leader for so many, but now embroiled in yet another Vatican scandal. It's reported that he held a private meeting with bishops a week ago, discussing whether or not gay men should be permitted to be priests. And there the Pope used a highly offensive term to describe members of the LGBT+ community. The Pope is said to have referred to the word frotagini, which roughly translates as faggotness. Today came an apology from the Vatican. In the Church there is room for everyone, it said. The Pope never intended to offend or express himself in homophobic terms, and he apologises to those who felt offended by the use of a term reported by others. But that term did cause both offence and surprise among visitors we spoke to at the Vatican.
I think the Pope has no reason to be rude against any community.
It's a very bad gossip that we are hearing about this because we have to accept these kind of people.
It's a decade since Francis came to power, heralded as a softer, more welcoming Pope. He said, if a person is gay and has goodwill, who am I to judge? He allowed priests to bless same-sex marriages, but not everyone is convinced that the Pope is an ally.
Formally, this Pope tried to be to look progressive and to look like he's more inclusive towards the LGBT community, but we know that closed doors, the situation is different.
So how much damage has been caused?
Well, I think it was a real blemish on the Pope's reputation because it is in such contrast to his image on these matters. I think it's not insuperable. He's apologized, which is very rare, and he's said he didn't mean to express himself in homophobic terms.
Pope Francis is 87 years old and looks ever more frail. His health has already raised fears about the future. Now his critics say he is simply a bad leader. At the Vatican, there is turbulence. Adam Parsons, Sky News.
The Agatha Christie case is back at the High Court. Colleen Rooney's lawyers are contesting Rebecca Vardy's legal bill of around £325,000, calling it unreasonable. Mrs. Vardy lost her libel case in 2022 after a judge ruled that Mrs. Rooney's social media post accusing Rebecca Vardy of leaking her private information was substantially true. Mrs. Rooney's costs are expected to be discussed at a hearing in October. Protests have resumed in Georgia after the country's parliament overrode a presidential veto of the controversial Foreign Agents Bill. It would require media outlets that receive more than 20% of their funding from abroad to register as pursuing the interests of a foreign power. The bill has been criticized for restricting media freedom and obstructing Georgia's chances of joining the European Union. Now, just before we end Sky News at 10, the Liberal Democrats had a big message today, and that was sewage levels in UK rivers and lakes. And so to make a point, the leader of the Lib Dems, Ed Davey, made a splash in Windermere. Our correspondent Matthew Thompson joined him.
In any political campaign, you have to prepare for a bit of a wobble and be ready to throw yourself in. This is in some ways an archetypal Lib Dem campaign stunt. They know that they've got a battle on their hands getting the coverage beyond the Labour Party and the Tory Party. So, as you can see, they're not afraid to look a little bit silly in order to give the media the right pictures. And the Lib Dems know that stunts will only get them so far. Their challenge is to convince people in certain parts of the country that they, not the Labour Party, are the natural alternative to the Conservatives.
Look at the by-election successes we've had in this Parliament, where we won 4 historic by-elections in Tory heartlands, exactly the places you're talking about. No one expects us to. Labour was good in the polls, and we basically defied the odds, and we won. And we won for several reasons. People loved our candidates. They wanted to vote for a local champion who was going to really represent their area. They liked our policies, what we're saying on the NHS, on sewage, on the environment. And they also knew that we were the only ones who could beat the Conservatives in those areas.
And the Lib Dems aren't just a sideshow. Their performance could ultimately affect the size of the next government's majority, or even, whisper it, make them kingmakers in the treacherous waters of a hung parliament. Matthew Thompson, Sky News, Windermere.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the broadcaster and commentator Ali Miraj. Welcome both. Now, among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the eye. The headline, Triple Lock Plus to save retirees 28p a week on state pension. We'll be right back. This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. First, though, here are our top stories. The economy was centre stage on the election campaign, and Sky News can reveal that Diane Abbott has the Labour whip restored after being suspended from the party for a year and investigated over comments about Jewish people. Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, will face no further action over the council house row. She's condemned the senior Tory who made a complaint that she had broken electoral law. A 20-year-old man has been arrested tonight on suspicion of the murder of 34-year-old Amy Gray, who died after being stabbed on a beach in Bournemouth. And hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the broadcaster and commentator Ali Miraj. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, The Telegraph leads with an exclusive interview with Rishi Sunak, who reveals he's spoken to Boris Johnson ahead of the election. The Metro describes the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, as locking horns with Rishi Sunak over Conservative proposals to give pensioners a £2.4 billion tax break. The Eye reports that Rishi Sunak's Triple Lock Plus will save retirees 28p a week on state pensions. The Mail also leads with a promise from the PM. They say rip-off degrees will be scrapped under a radical plan to fund 100,000 new apprenticeships. That story is also the lead in The Times. The Mirror's headline, meanwhile, cops drop Rayner probe as the home sale claims against the deputy Labour leader are binned. Meanwhile, a former Israeli spy chief allegedly threatened an ICC official over a war crimes investigation. That's on the front of The Guardian. The FT hears that the water regulator Ofwat is drawing up plans to help financially stricken companies like Thames Water avoid nationalisation. And The Star says Alan Titchmarsh has revealed that he chucks slugs into the next-door neighbour's garden. Well, they know now. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. As I mentioned, we're joined tonight by Jenny Kleeman and Ali Miraj. Thank you both for being with us. OK, let's start, obviously, with the election and with one particular story, front page of The Times. And that is Labour bars Abbott, that's Diane Abbott, from standing as its candidate. And there's two sides to this. There's this angle, but also that Diane Abbott, the whip, will be reinstated. And she, obviously, Jenny, is such a crucial figure in the Labour Party and has been for so long.
Yes, I mean, she's been an MP for 37 years. She's the first black woman to be elected as an MP. She's an incredibly important part of Labour's history. But yes, these two messages, at first you think that they're saying opposite things, but when you drill down into the detail, what's happened is she's going to have the whip restored, supposedly so that she can leave with dignity, according to what The Times is saying here. But the National Executive Committee is going to bar her from standing again as an MP for Hackney North and Stoke Newington, which is a very safe Labour seat. And, you know, Keir Starmer is ruthless. We have seen him when he first came out when the election was called, standing in front of a podium. We're used to these three-word slogans like take back control, get Brexit done. He has a one-word slogan, which is change. And he wants to be the change candidate, and he wants to show the world that he has changed the Labour Party. And he has got rid of any elements that could be connected to anti-Semitism, and you might say any elements that might be seen as hard left. But certainly, with Diane Abbott, she wrote a letter which was very ill-advised. She said it was an earlier draft of a letter, but it was nonetheless a letter which basically compared the discrimination that Jewish people and Irish travellers face to discriminations that redheads face. There was no need, really, for her to write this letter. But what is interesting is there's some reports coming out. BBC Newsnight has found out that is reporting that the party's internal investigation concluded in December, which means that if that's true, that means that either Keir Starmer knew about this and hasn't been honest, or he hasn't been properly informed about this investigation. So either way, it's not looking great. But you have to really feel for Diane Abbott, who has been strung along for such a long time in the wake of these Frank Hester horrific racist comments that were made, the Tory donor who said that Diane Abbott makes you want to hate all black women. She's had a really rough few months, and she's really been through the ringer over this. And you can see that a lot of unnecessary pain could have been avoided. But again, doing it this way means that the Labour Party don't have to go through the normal processes of getting a candidate. They can just put in their preferred candidate. They've sort of been riding down the clock in order to allow this to happen.
And she had apologised for the comments.
Yes, she had. She had.
Ali.
Look, Diane Abbott made a complete boo-boo, let's put it politely, when she wrote that letter. I mean, it was completely... What she was trying to imply was that people who face discrimination in a different way, it's not the same kind of discrimination that black people face. Now, I think it was very ill-advised. She did apologise, and I think that's to her credit that she did so, and she did so swiftly. Jenny says Keir Starmer's ruthless, and he is, and he should be. If he wants to be Prime Minister, there are no prizes for being, cuddly and friendly to everyone. He wants to purge the party of the hard left. That's exactly what he's done. He's done it with Jeremy Corbyn. He's done it with Diane Abbott. Now, the interesting thing for the Labour Party is that if you go to Islington North and speak to some of their activists, they're up for Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, he may be the next Ken Livingstone for them in Islington North. He's very popular. He's been there for like 40 years. But clearly, Keir Starmer wants to show that he has made an absolute break with the past. The anti-Semitism thing was hanging over the party with Corbyn. There was an Equality and Human Rights Commission report that reported and banged the party to rights on anti-Semitism. A number of cases have not been looked into. Two specifically they had referenced were not dealt with properly. And Corbyn was living in denial. He could have actually stood as a Labour candidate if he had accepted the fact that there was anti-Semitism under his watch, even though no one is saying that he himself is anti-Semitic, but he presided over a party that was perceived to be that way. So he's a master of his own making. So I think Keir Starmer is being ruthless. The left is being purged. I feel sorry for Diane Abbott on a human level, but she's been there for years. I think it's like, she's collateral damage in this, but it is what it is.
Let's take a look at another key person within the Labour Party. Front page of the Daily Mirror. Cops drop Rayner probe, and this, of course, is, the probe into the living arrangements of Angela Rayner, which, we spoke about for ages a few months ago, and now it's all been dropped. So good news for Labour.
Yeah, well, it's the probe into her tax affairs, which was made a criminal matter, or rather referred to the police by a Conservative MP. The police said it wasn't a criminal matter. They had referred the case to the local council, who says they were not taking action. Labour says HMRC say they're not going to proceed any further. So a kind of line has been drawn under this. You have to ask whether or not this is a wise use of police time at a time when, people don't trust the police to investigate when they've been burgled. And this is a story that has been an obsession of the right-wing press. It's like Keir Starmer's beer and curry night to distract from much bigger Tory scandals at the same time. Some people have really have got this between their teeth, this Angela Rayner thing. But, you have three different public bodies saying they're not going to do anything about it. She would certainly hope that a line has been drawn under it.
But HMRC haven't come out, have they, Jenny?
Labour say that HMRC...
Really?
Have,
OK,
yes.
Interesting, because it was being reported on the front of the Telegraph that it's not quite the case. HMRC's not saying much, but if that's clear, then clearly this has been cleared up. Look, the police are not investigating it, that's clear. It was to do with whether this house that was sold was her main residence or not, and whether she was on the electoral roll. That's been cleared up. HMRC were meant to be investigating whether capital gains was meant to be paid and all of this stuff, and they weren't commenting so far, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
OK. Well, let's look at some of the policies, because a little bit of that came out today as well. Front page of the Metro, headline there, locking horns, tax battle rages over pensions, various announcements. So Sunak and his triple lock plus announcement, and we also heard from Rachel Reeves. Ali, what have you made of, I suppose, the first proper economic policies that we hear in this election campaign?
Well, look, I think there are two things that happened today, Barbara. One was Sunak announcing his triple lock plus, keeping the triple lock, the higher of inflation, 2.5% on average earnings. That is a sacred cow. Even Labour is not touching that one because they all want to get the grey vote. But this plus thing is around the allowances and the fact that it will benefit pensioners to the tune of about £428 in the coming year, £100 per year after that. it's pie in the sky. It's nothing. It's not even a rounding error. The disappointing thing about this is, and clearly we're not going to get any real policies in an election campaign, is the fact that fundamentally you have to have a rethink on pensions. We've got an ageing population. We've got a birth rate that's 1.5 per average woman in this country. We have a structural problem. We're not the only country in the world that has it, by the way. A lot of Western countries have it, where we are going to be funding pensions to the extent that we can't really afford it. The pension age is already going up from 67 to 68. In France, they had riots on the streets when they were increasing it to 62 to 64. So we're not the only country, but not a peep out of Rishi Sunak on the fundamentals of it. It's just window dressing. Rachel Reeves, on the other hand, yes, she got the endorsement of, what was it, 160 leaders or whatever it was. Yeah. Some say it's second tier, a little bit unfair. I speak to business leaders every day of the week. And I tell you this, no one is scared about Labour. No one's particularly enthused, but they're not scared. They were scared under Corbyn. They're not scared now. They're perfectly fine. And in fact, she's been engaging with business leaders around infrastructure investment, around the sovereign wealth fund that she wants to set up. They take her seriously. She's an ex-Bank of England economist. She's a serious figure. No one is scared of Labour.
Jenny, before we come to you, let's just look at the front page of the Financial Times, where they mention Rachel Reeves' headline there. Reeves rules out surprise tax rises and bid to bolster economic credentials. So, Ali, going back to what you were mentioning.
Yes, I mean, her whole thing is focusing on economic stability. She keeps saying over and over again this whole thing, I've been very clear, which I can't bear it when politicians say it. It generally means they haven't been clear. But there's going to be, you know, that she can't have a quick budget because the OBR has to go through all her figures. They're desperate to portray themselves as a safe pair of hands. And look, in terms of this triple lock plus, this is the Conservatives appealing to their core vote, which is older people. And we've seen from their whole thing about national service that they're not really thinking about appealing to young people. They're retreating back into the safest possible ground in terms of who will vote for them. And as Ali says, the triple lock itself, you know, it's costing an extra £11 billion a year. It is a sacred cow. It is not viable in the long term with an ageing population. And the only reason why we have 6 out of 10 people who are pensioners about to pay income tax on their pensions is because of fiscal drag and because of not changing those boundaries. So it's all very much kind of tinkering around the edges. And the thing that concerns me in all of this is that, you know, the Conservatives are saying that they're going to fund this triple lock plus out of this £6 billion that they say they're going to save.
Let me just bring up the front page of the Eye, because we kind of get into that. So front page of the Eye, triple lock plus to save retirees 20p a week on state pensions. But then they have various points there, just you know, the fine-tuning of the details.
Yes, but they say that they're going to find £6 billion by clamping down on tax evasion and avoidance.
Before.
And it's like, if this is, why haven't they done this before? If they've all of a sudden found a new way of doing this, it's extremely concerning. All of this just
tax evasion. Clamping down on tax evasion is always the envelope down the back of the sofa in every election.
Well, why haven't they been down the back of the sofa before? They've had 14 years to go there.
Well, indeed, you're absolutely right. Look, the interesting thing, though, from the Labour side is that Rachel Reeves is being very, very cautious around tax. The signalling she's giving is very, very limited tax changes. There'll be something on private equity executives in terms of how they do their thing, a VAT on school fees, the non-dom clampdown, but very little else. I mean, if you are a hardcore leftist Labour supporter, we're thinking that our public services are underfunded and there's going to be cash to splash around, you're sadly mistaken. There isn't going to be any cash. There's 2.7 trillion of public debt. We're in a mess. She realises that. That's why we're being so cautious about any public spending commitments.
Okay. Ali, Jenny, stay with us. Lots more coming up, including, is it up to the government of the day to decide which university degrees are worth having? Well, the Conservatives reportedly think so. We'll discuss that next.
I have been on the mountain on the summit day, one day behind them. So I have not been on spot when this accident happened. But what reports say is that these two climbers were not clipped in with their safety carabiners into the fixed line. And when this cornice on the summit ridge collapsed, probably because there have been too many people at the same place, they were just falling down the east face of Everest, the so-called Kangchung face, to the Chinese side. if we compare Everest to other mountains in the world that are often climbed, like the Matterhorn or Mont Blanc or Denali in the US or Aconcagua, we can't speak about overcrowding on Everest. This season, 570 people have summited Everest. On Mont Blanc in France, a good year, about 30,000 people summit Mont Blanc. So we can't speak about real overcrowding or mass tourism on Everest. But what definitely has to be done is a form of visitor management. Like you have to give teams certain slots, that we don't have this situation where many teams go for the summit on the same day and then these crowds on the summit ridge form. I work on Everest, and every year we have these expeditions there, and so it's a fundamental part of my life, and what we try is to make this climb safer, and there are possibilities to make this climb safer. And I think that many of the accidents that are happening on Everest just in recent years, like last year, the record year with 17 people dying on Everest, or this year we hold at 9 in the meantime, because one more Indian guy died today or yesterday. I think most of them could have been avoided with a new set of regulations. It's to respect and to follow minimum safety standards and protocols for the guide companies and operators that are working on Everest and taking clients up there, because it is still one of the most dangerous places on this planet. And there will never be 100% safety up there. But with the right regulations and protocols in place, I think many of these accidents can be avoided.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Jenny Kleeman and Ali Miraj. Okay, let's go straight to the Daily Mail. Front page here, Tory vow to ban rip-off university degrees by changing the law, and they call them Mickey Mouse courses. Interesting story, Ali, I think, to have on the front of the Mail at
That's right.
busy times.
That's right, Barbara. They're saying that up to 1 in 8 students could see Mickey Mouse courses axed in this radical plan. This is something that's been in the Tory sights for a while. They feel that there are some courses that simply are not delivering value for money. They're not actually leading to great jobs. People are getting to increasing amounts of student debt. And in some cases, they link it to the immigration issue, where some people are using university courses as a backdoor to come in here on 2-year work visas, right? So that's the background to the plan.
I know we just have the front pages, but do they mention any, do they give examples of any degrees?
They talk about, apparently, according to the Mail here, it says dropout rates, job progression and earnings potential will all be addressed to determine the worst courses and force them to close, which for me really concerns me as someone who studied the arts. There is a whiff in all of this that only STEM degrees are worthwhile, or degrees that will lead to high-paying jobs, and that the point of an education is purely getting a job. And it concerns me, because what does that mean if you're going to study philosophy? Is that a Mickey Mouse degree? Where do you draw the line? If the barometer of what a good degree is how much you're going to get paid and how easy it is to have job progression afterwards, it concerns me.
That is actually a very good point. It'll be interesting to see what they think a valid degree is, because you're absolutely right. If you come out with a degree and you go into the arts, what does that mean? I think that there have been a lot of universities that have sprung up and offering courses which, frankly, are costing a lot of money, 9,250 quid a year. In fact, that's also being subsidised by the number of people coming in. And are these people actually getting graduate-level jobs when they come out is the question. In many cases, no.
Let's take a quick look at the Guardian front page. Labour vows to clear NHS waiting lists in 5 years. Obviously, this, Jenny, a crucial point for so many people.
Absolutely. And Wes Streeting here saying that the fear is that what will happen to the NHS is what we've seen happen to NHS dentistry, which they know is something that's really going to frighten people. The idea that it will be impossible to see a doctor like it's impossible to see a dentist. But, you know, a promise of clearing it within 5 years is really depressing, I would say.
You see, I think Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, is a gutsy guy. Because, look, he's got the cover of the left knowing that Nye Bevan set up the NHS, right? So Labour is always going to be trusted more than the Tories on the NHS. This guy, Streeting, has got guts. He's coming out and saying that there's a cultural rot in the NHS, that we should not treat the NHS as a shrine, it's a service. It is there to serve people, and that there is this feeling that it's beyond reproach. So if you're a whistleblower in the NHS, and he points to Mid Staffordshire, he points to the infected blood scandal, to other scandals that have taken place, including at maternity units, there is this feeling that because it's a sacred cow, it's the national religion. It is as close to a national religion as we have. That's hampering this. So he wants to actually have a duty of radical candour from people in the service. That's one. He wants to increase the number of appointments to 40,000 a week. Let's see if he's successful there. He's willing to take action. Good for him, but there's no cash.
40 seconds. Let's finish on something a little bit lighter. Let's go to the Times, page 6 and 7. Ed Davey. Now, they were highlighting, of course, the issues with the waterways. Now, those are the pictures, but we have live pictures because our very, very brave Matthew Thompson, our correspondent, that's not him, so Ed Davey falling in. And then our correspondent was there as well, trying to interview him.
Do you know what? I think this might have been not unintentional, I would say. The Lib Dems, they do these stunts. They know that it will get on the news. It's an eye-catching policy that people would agree with. But given that he's saying that Lake Windermere is full of sewage, he's a brave man to want to fall into.
Does it work, Ali, do you think?
Well, look, I haven't heard much from the Lib Dems in terms of policy or anything, or Ed Davey much either, other than the fact that if you are in a southern Tory seat in the blue wall, you should be quaking in your boots. The Lib Dems, the yellow peril is out to get you.
All right. Ali Mirage, Jenny Kleeman, we'll leave it there for now. We'll see you again at the top of the hour. And now let's take a look at the weather. Unsettled conditions look set to last a few days yet, but it will turn drier in time for the weekend. Many places will have a mild and fine start tomorrow, but there'll be a few showers around first thing. Showers will develop more widely through the morning, some heavy and thundery, but there'll be sunny spells too. Northwest England and North Wales will see showers merging into longer spells of rain for a time. It will be warmer than it has been, but quite blustery in the south and west. The afternoon will bring further showers with torrential rain, hail and thunder, most likely across eastern Scotland and northeast England. And coming up next on Sky News at 11, Labour's Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves has refused to rule out further tax rises, but says her plans would be fully costed.